Welcome back to the Lovin Dubai show. We are now joined by Sam Morris, a chartered surveyor by trade who took on a mega challenge. Joined by teammates, they rode 3,000 miles across the Atlantic to raise important awareness for the increasing volume of plastic that we're finding in our ocean. First of all, a massive congratulations and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Casey. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So you have undertaken a massive challenge with Team Peninsula. First of all, tell us a little bit about it.
So now myself, my two teammates, Will and Toby, we're now like part of a very small club of people. Less than 1,000 people have rowed across the Atlantic versus more than 10,000 people now have reached the summit of Mount Everest. We did it to raise awareness about plastics in the oceans for two amazing charities. One of them is a non-profit here, which is called ASRAC, and the other one is based out of the UK. It's now called Ocean Generation. It was formerly Plastic Oceans UK. We chose these two charities because they do a three-pronged approach. They look at cleaning up the rivers and oceans. They also look at working with governments to introduce new policies. And the third part is they do the education part as well. So they go into schools, etc. So we took on the row. We set off on the 12th of December and we got to Antigua on the 19th of January. So it took us 38 days and 13 minutes.
And 38 days of solid rowing. So going into it, how long were you expected to take?
The world record for a trio is 33 days, I think it is. Might be 34, but yeah, like 33 or 34 days. We were planning to do it in approximately 40. That was our target, and coming in sub 40 was awesome. We came 8th out of 36 teams doing it this year. It was the largest ever fleet to go across.
And so let's go back to the right start. Let's say, for example, you're backed by rowing experts, so you have guidance as you're training, but what actually inspired you three to get together and take this on?
There are a number of different reasons for this. Obviously, I mentioned the charities, and we wanted to do something to raise awareness and highlight the plight of plastics in the oceans. But from a personal level, I would say there's always the joke that we're not married, so therefore we had the freedom to go out and do this. But I think that the actual reason for me was the last few years I've been running a lot of ultra marathons and a lot of endurance sport, and I just felt that it was a sort of logical next step. And I think, nowadays people are going out, they're buying a lot of sort of material goods, larger houses and luxury cars, etc. But I don't necessarily think that all these material things actually make you happy. And I think there's a lot to be said in the fact that you find comfort through discomfort and pushing your mind and body as far as you can possibly push it. And I think this is the most extreme endurance event you can do on the planet, because you're literally rowing for 12 to 14 hours a day in sometimes massive seas. So we had 7 or 8 meter waves for about 3 or 4 days halfway across. And it's the sleep deprivation and the fatigue. So it's all of that combined in a tiny little enclosed environment. So for me, I just wanted to see how far I could push my body and mind, as well as obviously make a large gesture and try to raise awareness for the plastics issue.
Amazing. So like you said, it is the most difficult endurance race on the planet, and you've actually done the Marathon des Sables. So how do they actually compare?
They're two different beasts. They're both magical experiences. The Marathon des Sables, or MDS, is one hell of a challenge, but at the end of the day, you can be rescued. Whereas when you're rowing across an ocean, if something happens to you, you're basically on your own for probably 12 to 24 hours at best, if someone can get to you. So it's all about survival, whereas the Marathon des Sables is more about endurance, I would say. Yeah.
Can you take us into the boat situation? It's very difficult for us to imagine having I know that the boats are going to be on show at the at the International Boat Show, but what actually is the physical boat like when you're inside rowing? How comfortable is it?
Sure. It's just under 9 meters long. We had something called a Rannoch R45, which is like the kind of Rolls Royce or the Bentley of the ocean rowing boats. They're not very stable, so as you're walking sort of past somebody rowing, the boat does lean. And even down to when somebody's sleeping in one of the two cabins, there's a cabin at the front and the back, and the bow and the stern. And if somebody's sleeping and they roll over to one side and you're rowing, you literally like go and wake them up and tell them to get back in the middle. That's how unstable they are. Very cramped conditions, 3 rowing spaces, a lot of storage in the hull for all the food. There's an onboard water maker because we make drinking water from seawater, or made drinking water from seawater. Besides that, in a storm, you get into the cabins and you put out what's known as a power anchor, which is like a 200-meter rope with a parachute on the end, and it holds your boat facing into the waves, and you just get in the cabins. And these boats are so strong and robust, they're made to withstand storms. So you know that you're relatively safe as long as you're always clipped onto the boat.
That's right. Clipped onto the boat. And did you come did you come into contact with any storms throughout the trip?
No, we were quite lucky from that perspective, but we did encounter some massive waves for about 3 or 4 days. And at night time, it's pretty scary. It's like rows of like terraced houses coming towards you just repeatedly. And sometimes it was so dark, you just didn't sort of see them, but you just heard the roar coming towards you. And then you just suddenly get smashed by these massive waves. Luckily, we didn't capsize. We generally went over the top of them, but a few waves did actually come over the top of us, and we got very wet. And at one point, 3 times our rudder sort of disengaged at night time in the darkness, which meant our boat was then side on to the waves, which is very dangerous because that's when it starts to roll. But luckily, we didn't capsize. So, yeah, but it was scary at the time.
The thing is, exactly, you're saying this also nearly casually, and I think many of us can't even imagine what that must feel like to be inside this kind of enclosed space and have, you know, the thundering waves coming down on you. How do you mentally prepare for this?
So there were 2 aspects of the training. Obviously, physically, we had a trainer who's also rowed a number of oceans as well, a chap named Tom Kelly, who I highly recommend. The other aspect is the mental training, where you've got to have everything out in the open with your teammates, and you've got to brainstorm every sort of eventuality. So we spent, close to 2 years leading up to train for the race. And the mental part of that, we did a lot of, it was like marriage counseling, where we would sit there and actually work through a marriage counseling plan and talk about how we were scared of things, what things would excite us, what things annoyed us about each other, just to make sure everything was out in the open. Because mid-Atlantic, when you're sleep deprived and tired, that's when obviously stress goes up and things can flare up over little things. We had to make sure that we were fully mentally prepped for it.
Well, that actually leads into my next question, because I was wondering about your teammates. So you were dubbed Mr. Motivator, and then you also had Mr. Method and Mr. Morale. So did you, throughout it, did you kind of stand by those nicknames, or did you kind of push into each other's boundaries a little bit?
Yeah, I would say we would, but at the same time, everything's quite fluid because everyone has their ups and downs at different times. So you go through massive highs and massive lows. So at certain times you've got to step up as a motivator. Other times you've got to step up and be a leader. Other times you've got to just sit back and bite your tongue. So everyone sort of changes their role depending on what's needed. And we all knew what we had to do to get through. And we were quite lucky. So we finished the row as friends, whereas some teams unfortunately finish and they don't talk again. Whereas we got off the boat and we're still friends, which is the main thing. Yeah.
That's really amazing to hear. My final question is about just being on the boat, and is there any downtime throughout the race? Like, do you have a phone, or, are you connected to Instagram? Do you have a book? Can you take your mind away from the race, or is it 24 hours razor sharp focus until you get to the end?
For sure. So when you're not rowing, you have 1 to maybe 3 hours off the oars at a time, depending on what your shift patterns were. So when you're off the oars, you're making water, you're getting calories in, you're then trying to sleep, you're trying to get the salt off your body as well because of all the salt sores. But then other things to distract us were the wildlife. We saw lots of dolphins. One of the pods of dolphins must have been about 100. It was huge. It was just vast as far as you could see. We saw whales came up, and their blowholes were blowing. It was very cool. We had sharks following us as well. So you don't actually see the sharks, you just see the fins. We had sea turtles as well. That was very cool. Very nice birds as well. All the way across, there were birds, which was quite mind-blowing actually in the mid-Atlantic. And then the other amazing thing as well, like 2 other things were like cleaning the hull, because you had to clean the hull 2 or 3 times. And at its deepest, the Atlantic's 5 kilometers deep. So you jump off the boat, obviously you're tied on, and you're there swimming, cleaning the hull, 4 hours after seeing a shark fin go by, which is a bit scary. And that's your nearest land is 5 kilometers underneath you. And the nearest people are in the International Space Station. So that was quite a cool experience. And then the other super cool experience for me was the phosphorescence. So the plankton close at night time. So you get these patches of plankton every now and then. And there was one night when it was flat calm, plankton was glowing everywhere. And then every little ripple had a really intense little line across it. Every oar stroke was really bright. So that was cool. And then there was no moon that night. So we had the full stars above us, no clouds, and the full arc of the Milky Way coming down from the horizon to the other side with the glowing phosphorescence. I mean, literally, I tried to take photographs, but they didn't come out. It was absolutely magical. Yeah, so one hell of an experience.
It sounds positively unreal, and it's the type of thing that only few people in this world will ever get to experience. And I'm sure there's people watching who would like to experience it, but of course it's not for everyone. Can you give, I think, maybe one piece of advice for anyone who would ever consider it, something that you didn't know going in that might help people considering to take it on?
Sure, it's really just a sign up thing. Just sign up. Once you pay your money, you're locked in. You've got to go for it. I started off in 2016 signing up for the MDS. Approached the best ultra running coach in the region here called Lee Harris, and said to Lee, please could he train me? And Lee said to me, what's your ultra endurance background? And I said, well, I've used to play team sports. And he took me under his wing, and 9 months later I did the Marathon des Sables. And same thing with the rowing as well, having never rowed before, nor had Will or Toby. We signed up, had a 2-year lead-in period, and you just learn as you go, and you that's it. So just sign up, get on with it. Otherwise, if you're having a midlife crisis, go out and buy a sports car. One of the two. So, yeah.
One or the other. And dare I ask, what's next if you've completed 2 of kind of the toughest endurance races on the planet?
Very busy at work this year, working on quite a large project here. After that, I'm thinking about a race in the States. It's similar to the Marathon des Sables. It's 265 kilometers, 5 days in the US. It's called the Grand to Grand. So that's my bucket list for maybe September 23.
So just another easy one to tick off.
Exactly, yeah. So the midlife crisis continues.
Okay, before you leave us, we know that it was super important for all of you, the cause and the awareness you're raising for plastic in the ocean. Can people still donate? And if people want to support, how can they do that?
So unfortunately, in the UAE, individuals are not allowed to donate. So we were very clear about this. The laws here are very strict. So we have a Just Giving page, which people can go to our website and find the link. But I've got to be very, very clear that we are not raising any funds for charity. We're raising funds for the expedition and from non-UAE individuals, just to be clear on that. Okay.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, that was that was Sam Morris, who has completed.
Oh, you've
Oh, I was just going to say thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. An absolutely phenomenal challenge that you've completed, and a massive well done. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Casey. Lovely to meet you. Have a great afternoon.
That is it for us on the Lovin Dubai show. See you later. Bye-bye.